On July 19th, 1977, the world teacher, the Christ Maitreya, head of the spiritual hierarchy, emerged from his ancient retreat and is now in the modern world. With his disciples, the Masters of the Wisdom, he will inaugurate the new age of synthesis and brotherhood.
Good morning and welcome to our World Teacher Programme on Wellington Access Radio 106.1 FM, presented by Teresa and David on behalf of Share International New Zealand.
Our last 3 podcasts featured the Master Jesus and his work 2,000 years ago. You can listen to them again on the website shareinternationalnewzealand.wordpress.com. Now we're going to move on to the present day and, for the benefit of new listeners, read Benjamin Creme's description of the event which all the major religions are expecting, the reappearance of their teacher.
Benjamin Creme's book, The World Teacher for All Humanity, starts with the following article edited from his public lectures in Tokyo in 2003 and Osaka in 2006. It presents an overview of the emergence of the World Teacher and the Masters of Wisdom.
Mr. Creme begins. Much of what I have to say is already known, or if not known, easily available. Beginning in 1875, some of this information has already been published in books translated into many languages, and is available to anyone who takes the trouble to read them.
The great disciple, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, founder of the Theosophical Society, began the dissemination of this information. She lived for 3 years in the Himalayan mountains with the masters of whom I shall speak. Her work was followed in 1924 by that of another great Russian disciple, Helena Roerich, through whom the Agni Yoga teachings were given to the world, and by a great English disciple, Alice A. Bailey, between 1919 and 1949.
I have been able to bring these teachings up to date, to show what is actually happening in the process of the return of the Masters to the everyday world. It is from my own personal experiences and contacts that I make these assertions. But I am not asking you to believe me. I am simply presenting my information to you for your consideration.
If it appears to you to be reasonable and rational, if it seems to relate to present-day events, the happenings of the world that are taking place, and have been for many years, if in a word it has for you the ring of truth, then by all means believe it, but otherwise not.
I am perfectly conscious that much of this information will appear strange and perhaps unbelievable to some of you. If that is the case, please be assured that I shall not be the slightest bit offended or even disappointed. But if this information at least allows you to hope for a better future for yourself and your children, I shall be perfectly satisfied.
What the world needs now is the removal of fear and the renewal of hope. We are going through one of the greatest periods of tension since the end of the Cold War. This particular phase of tension and crisis began on the 11th of September 2001.
On that day, an attack by foreign terrorists took place on the World Trade Center in New York and the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., as well as a foiled attack on the White House. It was an attack not only on America, but on American power, represented by the Pentagon and the White House, and the major industrial nations of the world through the attack on the World Trade Center.
That terrible, dramatic attack took America and the entire world by surprise and shock. The world has been in a state of shock ever since, but I suggest it should not have taken the world so much by surprise. It was one of the most daring, most audacious and most organized of many such attacks on the Western world.
That attack resulted in an attack on Afghanistan, in which more ordinary innocent citizens of Afghanistan were killed than were killed in the World Trade Center on the 11th of September. This was followed by the American and British attack on Iraq and the continuing occupation in which hundreds of thousands of innocent Iraqi citizens have also lost their lives.
The American, British and other governments have not recognized that the attack on the World Trade Center and Pentagon and the foiled attack on the White House have a cause. It is the effect of a cause. In other words, it is karmic. It is the result of the law of karma, the law of cause and effect.
The cause is complex, but put very simply, it is the extreme difference in living standards between the developed Western world and the developing world. 1/3 of the world, mainly America, Europe, Japan, Australia and Canada, usurp and greedily waste 3/4 of the world's food and some 83% of all other resources. The developing world, the so-called Third World, has to make do with the rest, distributed among 2/3 of the world's population.
This division is the result of greed, lack of compassion and complacency. It is unfair and extraordinarily dangerous for the security of the world. The developing world will not forever put up with this state of affairs. They will demand their fair share of the world's resources. The first steps in that direction were the attacks on America.
The greatest danger to the world was not the existence of Iraq with its dictatorship, nor is it Iran with its fundamentalist Muslim attitudes and lack of respect for America, or North Korea with its military potential. The greatest danger is the discrepancy in living standards between the developed and the developing world.
Humanity is taking a long time to understand these problems, the true problems that beset it today. But unless it understands these problems, there will be no hope for the future of the world. The tensions existing in this discrepancy of living standards have within them the seeds of a third world war. That war would be nuclear and would destroy all life on the planet.
I am a very optimistic person by nature. I tend to look on the brighter side of life, and am not too depressed by gloomy thoughts of the world's destruction. But if I did not know what I do know, I would have little hope that humanity would survive. Little hope that in time humanity would awaken to the real problems that beset it and begin to change. I am very doubtful that on our own we would do that.
Fortunately, I do not believe that we are alone, without help, without guidance. There has stood behind humanity, from the earliest days of its existence, a group of men of extraordinary insight and wisdom, called the Masters of Wisdom, the spiritual hierarchy of our planet.
This group of men have gone ahead of us in evolution. They have come to a point where they need no further incarnational experience on Earth, but nevertheless remain to act as a kind of inner government of the world.
The Masters are the custodians of the plan of evolution that is driving humanity forward and upward, whether we are aware of it or not. They have brought humanity from the stage of early animal man and woman to the point where we are today, guiding, protecting and stimulating the evolutionary advance of all people.
Sometimes they have worked more openly, but for the last 98,000 years, with very few exceptions, they have lived in the remote mountain and desert areas of the world, such as the Himalaya, the Andes, the Rockies, the Carpathians, the Urals and the Gobi Desert and other deserts. From these mountain and desert areas, working mainly through their disciples, men and women in the world, they have guided humanity along the evolutionary path with their love and wisdom.
For over 500 years the Masters have known that sooner or later they would be required to come back into the everyday world, known to us for what they are. This pertains to their own evolution, quite separate from the human evolution. The only question was when humanity would be ready for the return to the everyday world of such spiritual giants.
Until relatively recently, it was thought it would probably be 1200 or 1300 years yet before we would be ready to receive men of that kind of spiritual potency into our everyday world. But in June 1945, at the end of the Second World War, Maitreya, the head and leader of that group of perfected men, announced his decision to return at the earliest possible moment into the world, along with a large number of his group.
Maitreya said that he would come when a measure of peace had been established in the world, when the energy we call goodwill, which the Masters see as the lowest aspect of love, was manifesting and leading to the establishment of correct human relationships, and when the religious and political groups were putting their houses in order. These conditions did not have to be perfectly met, but when our minds were at least moving in these directions, Maitreya said that he would come without fail at the earliest possible moment.
The coming of Maitreya was foretold 2,600 years ago by Gautama Buddha, who said that at this time would come another great teacher, a Buddha like himself, by the name Maitreya, who, by dint of his colossal spiritual stature, would galvanize and inspire humanity to create a brilliant golden civilization based, as he put it, on righteousness and truth.
Every manifestation of a teacher that has occurred from the earliest times has been a disciple overshadowed by the teacher. Historically, they are known as Hercules, Hermes, Rama, Mithra, Vyasa, Confucius, Zoroaster, Krishna, Shankaracharya, Gautama, Jesus, and Mohammed. These have all been disciples overshadowed by the teacher himself. Just as the Buddha worked through the Prince Gautama, so in Palestine, Maitreya worked through Jesus of Nazareth.
Maitreya is the embodiment of what we call the Christ principle, the energy of love. Maitreya is so advanced, so pure, he can embody in his own being, and not simply channel, the energy of love, the second aspect of God. Through Jesus, he showed that love of God in its perfection in a man for the first time, just as through the Prince Gautama, the Buddha showed the wisdom aspect of God in its perfection in a man for the first time.
Now, for the first time in history, the teacher has come into the world himself. Maitreya is the head and leader of his group of disciples, the Masters of Wisdom, and holds the office of World Teacher. He has held this office for the last 2,000 years, appearing through Jesus, and will be the World Teacher for this coming age, the Age of Aquarius, which is now beginning and will last for about 2,350 to 2,500 years.
For thousands of years, Maitreya has lived in retreat in the high Himalaya. But Maitreya arrived in the everyday world, he has never been away from the world, on the 19th of July 1977. On the 8th of July, Maitreya descended from his mountain retreat in a self-made body, constructed especially for this mission in the world. This body allows him to live at our level of existence, and at the same time be sensitive enough to bring in his consciousness as the world teacher.
Maitreya stayed on the plains in Pakistan for some days to acclimatize that body, and on the 19th of July came by plane into London, England. He has made the Asian community of London what he calls his point of focus in the modern world.
What do I mean by the coming age of Aquarius? Let me illustrate it in astronomical terms, because it is an astronomical fact that we are entering a new age. The solar system of which we are a part makes a journey in space that takes, relative to the constellations, about 25,000 to 26,000 years to complete. Therefore, every approximately 2,150 years, our Sun comes into a particular alignment, an energetic relationship, with each of the constellations in turn. When the Sun is in that alignment, we say we are in the age of that particular constellation.
For the last 2,150 years, that alignment was with the constellation Pisces. We have been in the age of Pisces, and that age has come to an end. The Sun has moved away from the sphere of influence of the energies of Pisces and is entering the same relationship with the constellation Aquarius, therefore with the energies of Aquarius.
The energies of Pisces began to be withdrawn in 1625. The energies of Aquarius began to come in and affect our planet in 1675. Today there is a kind of balance.
The energies of Pisces and the energies of Aquarius are, as far as we are concerned, more or less equal, and that is our problem. The energies of Pisces are being withdrawn and have left all the structures that were built under their influence: political, economic, religious, social, scientific, educational, cultural, and so on. All these structures have become crystallized.
They are extant, but they no longer have the energy that brought them into being, so they do not work anymore. As we have responded to the energies of Pisces, they have completely split the world into tiny fragmented parts.
The energies of Aquarius, which are mounting in potency with every day that passes, work on us in a very different way. They have a completely different effect on humanity. They are the energies of synthesis. As the energies of Pisces have divided the world, the energies of Aquarius will draw humanity together, blending and fusing humanity into one group.
At the start of every new age, from the beginning of time, a teacher from the spiritual hierarchy of masters has come into the world to inaugurate the age, set in motion the ideas that would uplift and galvanize humanity, bringing it forward in its evolution, and creating conditions in which this could be done.
Maitreya's plans are to awaken humanity to the perils before it and show humanity how to avoid self-destruction. Maitreya says it is really very simple for humanity if we could take the first step.
Humanity needs above all to establish peace. Without peace there will be no future for humanity, because we have the nuclear capacity to destroy the world and all life, human and subhuman alike. How do we get peace? That is the essential question. Certainly not using the methods of the American and British governments in recent times when they attack one country after another. That is certainly not going to give peace to the world. It will not even end terrorism in the world. There will never be an end to terrorism until the world itself has changed.
Only one thing will create peace and the end of terrorism: the creation of a just world. If there is no justice, there will never be peace. If there is no justice, there is no hope for any of us, because everybody in the world will die unless we establish justice in the world. There is only one way to establish justice, and that is to share the resources of the world more equitably. It is so simple, and yet we refrain from doing it. Without sharing, there will never be justice. Without justice, there will never be peace. Without peace, there is no future for us.
So what do we have to do? The developed nations have to realize that the world's food and resources belong to everyone, are given by divine providence for all the peoples of the world, not just the developed nations who have the money to buy the food and resources.
They have the money to buy because they are more advanced technologically, more advanced in industry perhaps. But the goods they produce do not give value to the resources and activities of the people of the third world. This approach is cavalier, dishonest, greedy, and selfish, and has to change, otherwise there is no future for the world.
The masters of the spiritual hierarchy have plans for the redistribution of the world's resources, which will be presented as soon as humanity says, "You are right. We believe that the only way is by sharing better the resources." How do we do it? It is simple to do. Probably the most simple thing to do is that first step into sharing. People imagine things in a purely personal way. They say, "Oh my goodness, sharing? Are they going to take my money out of the bank and send it to Indonesia or Africa to people that I do not know?"
It's actually very different from that. It will be done at national and international levels. Each nation will be asked to make an inventory of what it has and what it needs, what it produces and what it imports. Then each nation will be asked to make over in trust for the world as a whole into a common pool that which it has in excess of its needs.
Out of that common pool, the needs of all can be met. Will that end terrorism in the world? Probably not at first, but it is the first step into the creation of justice in the world, and will create the essential for that correct relation that we call trust.
When we create trust, we can do marvels. We can do what is impossible without it. When countries trust each other, they can talk to each other without fear. With the creation of trust through sharing of resources, we can begin to solve all the world's problems one after the other. They become approachable and easily solvable, and the world can be changed very quickly indeed.
Maitreya, as world teacher, is awaiting an opportunity to present his teachings directly to humanity. Maitreya is waiting for the collapse of the US and European economies to come forward, to present himself to the world, to start his public teaching. But events in the world are so critical, with so much tension and fear, that Maitreya is concerned to come forward as soon as possible.
He is taking every opportunity to present himself closer and closer to the groups who are working for the reappearance, but also on a wider scale to the people in the world.
He talks to people at all levels, ordinary people and those most useful at every level, political, economic, social, scientific, educational, and so on. People who can help the world, who have influence for good in the world. In this way, he has built up a great body of people who in the immediate future will begin the changes necessary to transform the world for the better.
When Maitreya comes forward, he will not at first use the name Maitreya. He will present himself as an ordinary person, although of course an extraordinary person. He will appear at first in America on television on a large network, and then in Japan and around the world. He will become known for his analysis of the world's needs. Look for a man who is calling for justice for all the world, freedom for all the world.
When enough people are responding to what he has to say, Maitreya will be asked to speak to the entire world. On that day, the day of declaration as it will be known, you will see a now familiar face on television, that of Maitreya. The television networks of the world will be linked together by satellite, which are actually in place for this event. And then an extraordinary thing will happen.
Simultaneously, throughout the world, people will see Maitreya's face on their television sets. Maitreya is omniscient and omnipresent, and everyone above the age of 14 will hear his words, his thoughts, his ideas inwardly, silently, telepathically, in their own language.
As you are watching this face, his lips will not move, he will not speak, but his ideas will come into your mind. The French will hear him in French, the Germans in German, the English in English, and so on throughout the world. Whatever you are doing, if you are out fishing or under the car, if you are not watching television, you will still hear the voice, the thoughts, the ideas of Maitreya inwardly.
This miracle is a repetition, only now on a world scale, of the true happenings of Pentecost 2,000 years ago. Also, in this way, Maitreya will foreshadow the future ability of all people to communicate mentally, telepathically, at will over any distance.
Maitreya will give a short history of the long history of the world and show the height from which humanity has fallen into the materialism of today. He will introduce the fact of his group, the spiritual hierarchy of masters. He will show the future and outline some of the extraordinary scientific marvels that will open up a new life for humanity. He will make his appeal for justice, for sharing as the only way to justice, and so to peace in the world.
While this is taking place, his energy, the energy of love, will flow out in tremendous potency through the hearts of all. This will invoke an intuitive, heartfelt response to the message. He has said, "It will be as if I embrace the whole world." People will feel it, even physically.
On the dense physical plane, there will be hundreds of thousands of spontaneous miracle healings, cures throughout the world. In these 3 ways you will know that that man, and of course only that man, is the world teacher, awaited by the Christians as the Christ, by Muslims as the Imam Mahdi, by Jews as the Messiah, by Hindus as Krishna or Kalki Avatar, by Buddhists under his name Maitreya Buddha, by people of no religious affiliation who simply wish for a better life for all.
Our response to this event will determine the entire future of the world. Maitreya will present to us a choice. We have free will and the choice is ours. Simply put, it is a choice for sharing, justice and the end of war and terrorism forever, or the eventual annihilation of all life on earth, human and subhuman alike. Maitreya has already said, "My heart tells me your answer, your choice, and is glad."
And that's our programme for today. We'll continue next month with Maitreya's teachings and his priorities.
If you would like more information, our phone number is 06 3646 101. Or if you would like to discuss any aspects of this program, the number again is 06 3646 101. Our next World Teacher program will be on Saturday the 4th of November at the usual time of 10 a.m.
To inquire about books by Benjamin Creme explaining the re-emergence of the World Teacher, the phone number is 04 234 1133. You may wish to subscribe to the free-of-charge monthly newsletter, which contains a small selection of articles from the Share International magazine. The website is share-international.org. You can also write to us at P.O. Box 9576 Wellington.
You have been listening to Teresa and David on behalf of Share International New Zealand. You can listen again to this podcast and previous ones in our new library at shareinternationalnewzealand.wordpress.com and click on the radio tab.